Apple has long been criticized for lack of diversity. But unlike most Silicon Valley giants, which suffer from unrepresentative employee rosters, Apple has few women and minorities in its executive suite as well. Just go to their executive page, and it's quite astonishing. And in fact, most keynotes by the company feature white males exclusively. At the last keynote, the only woman on stage was a supermodel talking about the Apple Watch. Well, today's keynote will be different, according to an exclusive interview with Tim Cook by our Friday co-anchor and Mashable senior tech correspondent, Christina Warren. Christina couldn't be with us today because she's trapped inside the Moscone Center waiting for the keynote to begin. But in that interview, Cook told Christina that a lack of diversity in Silicon Valley is the fault of the tech community, which he said hasn't done enough to show young women that it's cool to code and to be an engineer. Zoya, I think it's great that he's taking part of the blame, he and his peers, but I think there's a larger cultural issue at play that is probably beyond the reach of Silicon Valley executives. Now, you've spent most of your career in Australia and recently in Europe. What is, we always talk about Silicon Valley when we talk about diversity in technology companies, but what is the diversity situation in Australia and Europe?
Well, starting with Europe, in Brussels, there is not a lot of diversity when it comes to official events on tech. So I go to a lot of conferences, I go to a lot of panels. I recently went to a high-level panel run by the European Commission on cybersecurity, and there were 7 people on stage, and every single one of those 7 was a middle-aged white man. So it's certainly not a particularly diverse area to be in. In Australia, the situation is quite similar, although I don't think as significantly male-dominated when you look at the panels and when you look at the events that they have. But certainly in Australia, there are more male CEOs of the top 200 companies in Australia named Peter than there are women.
Yeah, I've seen measures like that where I think in the U.S. they use the name Kevin or something like that to compare within tech companies and so on. Now, in the U.S., of course, there's a very strong cultural bias in favor of males for technology. Kids are essentially programmed by TV shows and movies and stuff that tech is for boys. Is that the case in Australia as well? Is there an overwhelming or even a minor cultural bias that tells girls that tech is not for them?
I think there absolutely is. And when you look at the numbers of students who study things like mathematics and science and engineering in universities, and even in school, at a school level, the students who are studying maths and sciences, there's a huge bias towards men studying it. And I don't know what that is. I'm not sure where that message comes from, but certainly there's a much larger number of men going into engineering and IT than there are women.
Yeah, it's probably a global phenomenon, certainly the case apparently within the English-speaking world and probably mostly worldwide. We'll see what the Tim Cooks of the world can do about it. Google launched a big effort, and they recently published their progress, and there wasn't any. So it's harder than it looks, I guess. So we'll see how they do in that.